In 1945, an American soldier disappeared from a battlefield in Europe. Soviet reports mention a black angel and a bear. US intelligence classified it as unexplained. In 1960, the same soldier reappeared, 15 years older in time, but not a day older in body. The case was dismissed and the evidence buried. Even the old hunters in Siberia, that land where vodka flows and fires burn low, tell stories of a woman who appeared from nowhere and vanished like smoke. They call her the Black Angel. They say she commanded bears and bent time itself. The governments called her a myth. The soldiers who saw her knew better. My name is Onyx. I'm writing this from Umutshime, 66 years after it happened, and I'm here to tell you, every word is true.
The bear's breath formed clouds in air so cold it could freeze your lungs solid in minutes. Nachi heard her friend before she saw her, the distinctive huff of massive lungs expelling steam, the scrape of claws on frozen ground outside the crude log shelter that had been Nachi's secret refuge for 3 winters. The temperature gauge she'd stolen from a 1930s weather station read -71 degrees Celsius. Even by Siberian standards, this was a night that killed. Nay, Nachi called out in Igbo from where she crouched by the small fire, using the affectionate term for the bear she'd befriended years ago. You should be in your den. It's too cold even for you. But the scratching at the door continued, urgent, and then came a sound Nachi had never heard from her friend before. A low, desperate whine that made every warrior instinct in her body snap attention. Something was wrong. Nachi grabbed her staff and pulled open the door. The wind hit hard and heavy like an avalanche, snow driving horizontal across the endless white wasteland. But the bear was there, massive and frost-covered, and looking at Nachi with dark eyes that held something almost human, pleading. "What's wrong, Ene? Your cub? Is she hurt?" The bear backed away from the door, then pushed forward again, huffing with clear urgency. Then she turned and started walking into the blizzard, looking back to make sure Nachi followed. Every sensible part of Nachi's mind screamed that going out in this cold was suicide. But the bear had never asked for help before, never looked at her with such desperate need. Nachi wrapped herself in every layer of fur and cloth she owned and followed. The bear led her maybe 60 yards from the shelter, far enough that the small building disappeared completely in the driving snow. Far enough that Nachi's fingers were already going numb despite her gloves. Far enough that she almost missed what the bear was showing her until she was standing right over it. A man collapsed in the snow, one arm flung out, blood staining the white around him and spreading crimson, wearing olive drab wool that Nachi recognized immediately from her hundreds of illegal jumps to the 1940s timeline. American military uniform, World War II era. And even before she dropped to her knees beside him, even before her shaking hands rolled him over to see his face, some part of Nachi's soul already knew who this was, had been dreading and hoping for this moment in equal measure since the day she'd crafted the amulet and placed it around his neck while he slept. Kang Chi. His face was gray with cold and blood loss, lips blue-tinged, a wound at his temple still bleeding sluggishly, his whole body shaking with involuntary shivers that meant hypothermia was already setting in. But there, visible even through his torn jacket, was the amulet she'd made, glowing with a faint, pulsing light against his chest. The amulet had activated, which meant he'd been dying, which meant her magic had pulled him across time and space to wherever she was, which meant, no, Nachi breathed, her hands already moving to check his pulse, to assess his wounds, to do anything to keep him alive. No, 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 Kang Chi, can you hear me? Kang Chi! No response. His pulse was there but thready, weak, his breathing shallow. He was maybe minutes from death. The bear huffed beside her, and Nachi understood. Her friend had found him, had recognized Nachi's scent on the amulet, the blood bond woven into its creation. The bear had known somehow that this dying man belonged to the woman who'd once shown her kindness. "Help me," Nachi commanded, and together, woman and animal working in perfect synchronization, they dragged Kang Chi's limp body through the screaming wind toward the shelter. The unconscious man she'd loved from the shadows for years, the man who wasn't supposed to be here, the man whose presence meant she'd interfered with time itself, and broken every sacred law of Umutshime, and probably doomed them both. But she'd worry about that after she saved his life, if she could save his life. The shelter was barely large enough for one person, let alone two. Nachi dragged Kang Chi across the threshold, while the bear watched anxiously from outside, too massive to enter, but clearly unwilling to leave. Snow immediately began drifting against the doorframe. Nachi's hands moved with the desperate efficiency of someone trained from childhood in both warfare and healing arts. Strip the wet, frozen uniform. Check the wounds. Stop the bleeding. Restore warmth. Move, you're losing him. Shrapnel wounds across his chest and left shoulder. Metal fragments still embedded. The wounds angry and inflamed. A bullet grazed at his temple that had bled profusely, but wasn't deep enough to be fatal. Multiple lacerations from what looked like an explosion. Severe hypothermia. Signs of shock. She'd seen these exact wounds before, in her illegal jumps to various wars across time. Had watched field medics work in desperation. Had stolen medical texts to study. Had learned everything she could because some treacherous part of her heart had always known she might one day need to save this specific man. From her carefully hidden supplies, herbs brought from Umuchaim that shouldn't exist in this timeline, bandages stolen from a future she had no right to access, tools she'd crafted with her own hands. Nachi worked. She used her knife to extract the largest shrapnel pieces, her hands steady despite her racing heart. She packed the wounds with poultices that combined ancient Igbo healing knowledge with techniques she'd observed in 1940s military hospitals. She wrapped him in every scrap of fabric and fur she owned, building the fire as high as the small space allowed, pressing her own body against his to share warmth. She forced bitter root tea between his blue lips, drop by drop, willing warmth and life back into his body. "You can't die," she whispered in Igbo, then English, then Korean, the languages she'd learned across timelines, the last one learned specifically for him, from years of watching from the shadows. "Kang-chi, you can't die. Not when I finally have you here. Not when I've broken every law to save you. Please live." Hours passed. The blizzard outside raged with a fury that seemed personal. The bear remained at the door like a massive frost-covered guardian, occasionally huffing as if checking that Nachi was still working. And finally, after an eternity compressed into the space of a single night, Kang-chi's breathing deepened, steadied. His shivering became less violent. Color began returning to his face. His eyelids fluttered. "Where?" The word was barely a breath, but it was the most beautiful sound Nachi had ever heard. "You're safe," she said in English, keeping her voice gentle even though her heart was hammering. "You're in Siberia. You're injured but alive. I'm a friend. I'm going to help you." His eyes opened, dark brown, confused, hazed with pain and fever and the disorientation of someone who'd been ripped from one place and deposited in another with no memory of how. He looked at her without recognition, which hurt more than Nachi had expected, and tried to speak. "Don't," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat strong and steady beneath her palm. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been badly hurt. Just rest. You're safe here." "Safe," he mumbled, his eyes already sliding closed again. "Angel." Then he was unconscious again. But this time it was healing sleep rather than the edge of death. His breathing was steady, his color better, his body finally accepting warmth. Nachi sat back, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and relief and terror at what she'd just done. She looked at the amulet still glowing faintly against his bare chest, at the man she'd saved and damned in the same moment, at the door where snow was building up against the frame. "What have I done?" she whispered to the bear, who huffed softly in response. But Nachi knew exactly what she'd done. She hadn't just saved a life. She'd torn a man from his timeline during a war. She'd created a temporal paradox that would ripple through history. She'd committed a crime so severe that the elders of Amuchim would... The air beside her shimmered. Nachi was on her feet with her staff in her hands before the shimmer solidified into two figures materializing in her tiny shelter. Obi and Chima, both wearing their traditional Igbo warrior attire. Wrapped cloths in deep indigo with geometric patterns, beaded necklaces, leather armbands, carrying their weapons, both with expressions that mixed fury and fear in equal measure. "Nachi." Obi's voice was low, dangerous, nothing like the gentle tone he usually used with her. "What did you do?" Her brother Chima was already looking past her at the unconscious man, at the American military uniform discarded on the floor, at the obvious wounds. "You gave him an amulet. You intervened. You pulled him from his timeline." "He was dying." Nachi's hands tightened on her staff. "The amulet activated because he was dying. What was I supposed to do? Let him die?" "Yes!" Obi took a step toward her, and Nachi had never seen him like this, the betrayal in his eyes cutting deeper than any weapon. "That's exactly what the laws demand. You observe, Nachi, you do not interfere. How many times have the elders taught us this? How many times has your own father warned you?" "I couldn't." The words tore out of her throat. "Obi, I couldn't just let him die. I couldn't." "Why?" His voice cracked on the word. "I've loved you since we were children. I've waited patiently for you to see me, to choose me. I've defended you to the elders when they wanted to strip your time travel privileges for your reckless jumps. I've been faithful to our betrothal, and you risk everything. Our laws, our people's safety, your family's honor, my honor, for a stranger. He's not a stranger to me." The admission fell into the frozen air like a stone into still water. "Obi, I've been watching him since he was 10 years old. I've seen every act of kindness, Every moment of courage, every moment that was never yours to see. Chima grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. Sister, do you understand what you've done? The paradox you've created? This man has been removed from a war that's happening right now in his timeline. What happens to the battles he was supposed to fight? The people he was supposed to save or fail to save? The ripples could affect everything. Outside, voices cut through the howling wind. Sharp, authoritative, speaking Russian. Nachi's blood went cold. Soldiers. Obi was already moving toward the door, his hand going to the traditional weapon at his belt. Then we fight our way out. No! Nachi lunged forward, grabbing his arm with desperate strength. Obi, please. The weapons they carry, they're not like anything you've trained against. They kill from a distance. They kill with metal that moves faster than arrows. I've seen them. I've studied them. If you fight them with traditional combat, you die. Then what do you suggest? Chima demanded, positioning himself between the door and the unconscious Kang Chi. We can't let them capture us. We can't let them take the man. We can't let them see. The door burst open. 6 Soviet soldiers crowded into the small entrance, rifles raised, shouting in harsh Russian. They stopped dead when they saw what was inside. An African woman in traditional warrior dress, 2 African men in similar attire with weapons, and an unconscious American soldier in a shelter that had no reason to exist in the middle of the Siberian wasteland. Total, complete confusion registered on every face. The lead soldier, an officer by his insignia, barked an order in Russian. Ruki Verk, Nemedleno! Hands up, immediately. They want our hands up, Nachi translated quickly, her own hands already rising slowly. Obi, Chima, please, do not fight them. I'm begging you. I won't let them take you. Obi's voice was pure steel, his body coiled like a spring ready to release. I won't let them. He moved. It was the kind of speed that comes from a lifetime of warrior training, from muscles honed through constant practice, from reflexes faster than conscious thought. Obi closed the distance to the lead soldier in a heartbeat, disarmed the man before he could even process the movement, had the rifle in his own hands and was turning toward the other soldiers. The gunshot was impossibly devastatingly loud in the small space. Obi made a sound, surprised, pained, confused, and stumbled backward. Blood bloomed across his chest, spreading dark across the indigo cloth with its geometric patterns, staining everything it touched. Obi! Nachi's scream was raw, primal. Chima caught him before he fell, was already pulling him backward, one arm supporting his Umuchaim brother, while his other hand began tracing the emergency time travel ritual patterns in the air, shouting at Nachi in Igbo. We're leaving! Now! Come with us! But Nachi was frozen. She's staring at Obi's blood, at the Soviet soldiers who were yelling and reloading, and clearly terrified of what they'd just witnessed, at Kang Chi still unconscious and vulnerable and completely defenseless. Nachi! Chima's roar snapped her back to the moment. He's dying! I have to get him to the healers now! Are you coming or staying? She looked at Obi, honorable, faithful Obi who'd loved her his entire life and was now bleeding out because of her reckless choices. Then at Kang Chi, the man she'd loved from shadows and distance who didn't even know her name. The choice was impossible. Chima made it for her. He grabbed her arm with his free hand, the other still supporting the dying Obi, yanked her into the ritual circle, and spoke the words of power that would tear them from this timeline. The world dissolved into light and motion, and the screaming chaos between times. The last thing Nachi saw before Umuchime materialized around her was the Soviet soldiers' terrified faces, the bear watching from just outside the door with something like sorrow in her dark eyes, and Kang Chi lying alone and defenseless in a shelter about to be overrun by men who would have questions he couldn't answer. Then the familiar sights and sounds of home crashed over her. The carefully planned mud brick buildings with their beautiful geometric patterns, the warm African air after Siberian cold, the sounds of her people going about their lives, and Obi, faithful, betrayed, dying Obi, collapsing in a spreading pool of his own blood, while healers came running and family members gathered and someone started screaming. It took Nachi a moment to realize the screaming was coming from her own throat. The healing house smelled of herbs and fear and the metallic tang of too much blood. Obi lay on a woven mat, his chest wrapped in bandages that were already soaking through with red, his breathing shallow and labored, his face gray. The healers clustered around him, their weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency as they mixed poultices and prepared treatments, but their expressions told a story Nachi didn't want to read. The metal is lodged inside, said Adaze, the eldest healer whose knowledge spanned 60 years. Her hands hovered over Obi's chest, not quite touching, as if she could sense the foreign object through skin and muscle. It's unlike any weapon wound I've ever treated. Our herbs can slow the bleeding, can fight infection, but if the metal stays inside, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Nachi sat in the corner of the healing house, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the man who loved her die because of her choices. Chima stood rigid by the door, like a sentinel carved from stone. his face carefully blank in the way that meant he was feeling too much to show anything. And then the air pressure changed, that subtle shift that meant someone important was approaching, and her father filled the doorway. Obadiah looked older than Nachi had ever seen him. The silver in his hair seemed more pronounced, the lines around his eyes deeper. He was a man who'd spent his life accumulating wisdom, and right now every bit of that wisdom was focused on his daughter with an expression that made her want to disappear. "Outside," he said quietly. "Shut now." The compound was busy with the organized chaos of Obadiah's household. 3 wives managing their children and responsibilities. The evidence of a successful man's life spread across the carefully maintained space. But when they reached the private gathering hall where the elders held their most important discussions, it was empty. Just father and daughter, and the weight of what she'd done. Explain. One word. Flat as a blade, final as a grave. So Nachi explained. All of it. The years of illegal jumps through time that had started when she was 12. The man she'd discovered in the 1930s timeline and had followed through his childhood and adolescence. The amulet she'd crafted. Blood magic and time magic woven together in violation of every law. The rescue. The Soviet soldier. The gunshot. The choice that had been made for her. When she finished, Obadiah sat in silence so long that Nachi thought he might never speak again. Outside, she could hear children playing, wives calling to each other, the normal sounds of life continuing despite the fact that her world was ending. "You've exposed us," her father finally said, each word carefully measured. "Soviet soldiers saw you appear and disappear. They saw Chima perform a time travel ritual right in front of them. They have the man you were protecting in custody. When they interrogate him, and they will interrogate him, when they start connecting the pieces, asking questions, sharing information with other governments, Nachi, the secret our people have guarded for centuries could be revealed." "I know." Nachi's voice was barely a whisper. "Baba, I know what I've done, but please, please, let me fix this. Do you let me go back to that timeline? I can get medicine, surgical tools, knowledge to save Obi. The healers don't understand gunshot wounds, but I've watched doctors in future timelines work. I can learn what they need. I can retrieve Kang Chi before he says anything to compromise us. You can make it worse." Obadiah's voice cracked like thunder through the empty hall. "Every time you jump, you create more paradox, more ripples spreading through time. Don't you see that your love is destroying everything? You're not helping. You're tearing holes in the fabric of time itself. Then let me save Obi at least." Nachi surged to her feet, desperation making her voice harsh. "He's dying because of me, because he tried to protect me. Let me bring back what's needed to save his life. By bringing the stranger here." Obadiah's eyes bored into her. "By pulling a man from another timeline, a man from the future, into Umuchaim. Exposing our home, our people, our very existence to someone who has no business knowing any of this. He's a good man, Baba. He won't betray us. He's honorable and kind, and you don't know what he is." Her father stood now, his full authority as an elder radiating from him. "You've watched him like a spirit in the shadows, seen fragments of his life, built a fantasy in your heart, but you don't know him. You don't know if curiosity or fear or self-preservation will drive him to expose us. You don't know if the governments of his time will torture him until he reveals everything. You don't know." The accusation hung between them, brutal and undeniable. "He'll die if I don't bring him here," Nachi said, forcing her voice to steady. "The Soviets will interrogate him, torture him for information he doesn't have, kill him eventually. And Obi will die if I don't get the medical knowledge to save him. So tell me, Baba, which death should I allow? The man I love, or the man who loves me? Listen, before this gets any more intense, I need to ask you something because I'm genuinely curious. Are you watching this at 2 a.m. when you should be sleeping? Hiding your phone under your desk at work? Have your family gathered around the TV wondering why you're so invested? Drop a comment and let me know what device you're on and where in the world you're watching from. And if you're already hooked, trust me, Chichu, you haven't seen anything yet. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get wild. Now let's continue. Obadiah looked at his daughter, brilliant, reckless, heartbroken daughter who'd inherited his gift for time travel and none of his restraint, and seemed to age 10 years in the space of a breath. "Go," he said finally, the word heavy with resignation. "Get what you need to save Obi. And if you must bring the stranger to save Obi's life, then bring him." "But Nachi." He gripped her shoulders with both hands, his eyes fierce. "This is the last time. Do you understand me? After this, you will marry Obi as promised and never jump again, or you will be exiled from Umuchaim forever. Those are your only choices. Do you understand?" "Yes, Baba." "Do you accept?" Nachi thought of Kang Chi's face, of Obi's blood, and of the future she was giving up. and the past she could never reclaim. Yes, I accept. The hospital was controlled chaos. It was May 1945, and Europe was celebrating. Victory celebrations mixed with exhausted relief, grief for the dead mixing with hope for peace. Nachi, dressed in a stolen nurse's uniform she'd taken from an unattended locker, moved through the corridors of a U.S. military field hospital in France with the confidence of someone who'd been stealing from the future for years. She knew what she needed: surgical supplies for removing embedded projectiles, antibiotics, the miracle drugs that were still new enough in this timeline that they were carefully guarded, medical manuals with detailed illustrations of treating gunshot wounds. She took what she needed with practiced efficiency, her pack filling with supplies that would look like magic to the healers of Umuchime. But even as her hands moved through the theft, her mind was on Kong Chi. She could feel him. The blood bond woven into the amulet created a connection that let her track him across time and space. He was alive, frightened, confused, being held somewhere cold and institutional. Soviet holding facility. Had to be. After securing the medical supplies, Nachi jumped forward 5 years to 1950 to access better maps and intelligence reports that had been declassified. She tracked the facility where captured soldiers had been held in 1945, cross-referenced with reports of unusual incidents. There, a facility 200 miles from where the bear had found Kang Chi. Soviet records mentioned an unexplained incident involving an American soldier and unidentified African individuals. That had to be where they'd taken him after she'd left. The rescue would be dangerous, but Nachi had an advantage the Soviets couldn't prepare for. She had the bear. The facility was exactly where the intelligence reports had indicated, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of a small Siberian town, surrounded by chain-link fence, guarded but not heavily fortified. The Soviets were more worried about external attacks than internal escapes. They had no protocols for what Nachi was about to do. She materialized in the shadows behind the building as night fell, her stolen medical supplies secured in her pack, her traditional warrior staff in hand. The temperature was brutal. Not quite as cold as the night the bear had found Kang Chi, but close enough. Nachi made the soft, clicking sound with her tongue, the call she'd taught her friend years ago. The massive form emerged from the darkness like something out of legend, frost already forming on her thick fur, her breath creating clouds in the frigid air. "Nah," Nachi whispered, touching the bear's muzzle with genuine affection. "I need your help one more time. Can you do this? Can you help me save him?" The bear huffed. Understanding or trust, Nachi wasn't sure which mattered more. Then let's go. The guards at the back entrance never stood a chance. The bear hit the door with her full weight, easily 500 pounds of muscle and momentum, and the wood splintered like kindling. Her roar echoed across the frozen landscape. Chikun, a sound of pure primal fury that made every living thing in hearing distance freeze in instinctive terror. Guards came running from inside the building, shouting in Russian, reaching for weapons. Nachi moved like water flowing around stones, like wind that couldn't be caught. Her staff was a blur, striking weapons from hands before they could be raised, sweeping legs, creating chaos without killing. She'd studied combat across dozens of timelines, had learned to fight without taking lives, because death created paradoxes that were impossible to predict. The bear was magnificent. She swatted aside a guard who got too close, sending him flying into a snowbank where he'd be cold but alive. She blocked the doorway with her massive body while Nachi slipped past. She was terrifying and merciful in equal measure, exactly what this operation needed. Alarms wailed, more guards poured out of the building, and Nachi slipped inside while chaos consumed everyone's attention. The interior was utilitarian, concrete floors, harsh lighting, the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask underlying odors of fear and desperation. The holding cells were in the basement. Nachi descended the stairs 3 at a time, her enhanced hearing tracking the sounds of guards mobilizing above her. Third cell on the left. Kang Chi sat on a metal bench with his head in his hands, still wearing his torn and blood-stained uniform, dried blood crusted at his temple. He looked exhausted, confused, and utterly lost. Their eyes met through the bars, and the world seemed to stop. "You," he breathed in English, his voice rough from disuse. "You're real. I thought I dreamed you. I'm real." Nachi's hands were already working on the lock, crude mechanical design, nothing her training couldn't handle. "And we're leaving, right now. Who are you? What's happening? The Russians keep asking me questions about a black angel, about people disappearing, about things that don't make sense." The lock gave way with a satisfying click. Nachi yanked the cell door open. "I'm the woman who saved your life once and's about to do it again. Can you walk?" Yes, but where are we?" "No time." She grabbed his hand, his skin warm and solid and real against hers. the first time she touched him while he was conscious, and pulled him into the corridor. "Move! Now!" They ran toward the back exit, Kang-chi stumbling slightly but keeping pace, his battlefield reflexes kicking in despite his confusion. I'm behind them. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, guards realizing their prisoner was escaping. "Stoi! Ostanovitis!" Stop. The shouts in Russian echoed off concrete walls. They burst out of the building into a scene of absolute pandemonium. The bear had outdone herself. Guards were scattered across the snowy ground in various states of unconsciousness. None dead, all very much alive, but unwilling to get up while a 500-pound apex predator stalked the area. Equipment was smashed. The fence had a bear-sized hole in it, and in the middle of it all stood Nachi's friend, looking absurdly pleased with herself. "The bear!" Kang-chi stared, his mind clearly trying to process what he was seeing. "That's the same bear. The one that brought me to you. How is that possible?" "Later!" Nachi pulled him toward the tree line where she'd marked her time travel anchor point. "Right now we need to—" Behind them, an officer was shouting orders. Vehicle engines roared to life. Searchlights swept across the compound, and oh no, a helicopter was starting up, its rotors beginning to spin. This was about to get much worse. Nachi ran, Kang-chi's hand still gripped in hers, the bear lumbering alongside them with surprising speed for her size. They reached the tree line, reached the specific configuration of stones and trees that marked her anchor point. Bullets started flying. Not aimed particularly well. The guards were shooting wild out of fear and confusion, but deadly regardless. Snow exploded around them. Kang-chi ducked reflexively, his combat training taking over. "What are you doing?" he shouted, as Nachi released his hand and began tracing patterns in the air, her lips moving with words in a language he didn't recognize. "Taking us somewhere safe." Nachi grabbed his waist, pulling him close. "Hold on to me and do not let go." He wrapped his arms around her just as the bear pressed against them both, just as the helicopter spotlight found them, just as an officer screamed something in Russian that probably meant "shoot them." The world dissolved. Colors bled into each other like wet paint. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. Sound became texture, and light became music, and everything turned inside out in a way that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. Kang-chi's grip on Nachi's waist tightened until it hurt, and she held him through it, anchored him as centuries folded between one heartbeat and the next. They materialized in Umuchim. The transition was violent enough that Kang-chi's knees buckled. He would have fallen face first into the red African earth if Nachi hadn't caught him, easing him down to sit, while his mind tried to process what had just happened. He looked up slowly, taking in his surroundings with eyes that kept getting wider. Carefully planned town with geometric mud brick buildings arranged in organized patterns. People everywhere, dozens of black faces watching him with open curiosity, wearing traditional wrapped cloths and elaborate jewelry, speaking a language he didn't recognize. Warm sun after endless Siberian cold. The architecture was sophisticated in ways he'd never seen, combining beauty with clear functionality, an evidence of advanced urban planning. Children stopped playing to stare. Adults emerged from buildings. The whole town seemed to be gathering to look at the stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere with Nachi and a very large bear. "Where?" Kang-chi's voice failed. He tried again. "What year is this?" "Approximately 1645 by your calendar," Nachi said gently, kneeling beside him in the dust. "Welcome to Umuchim. Welcome to my home." Kang-chi's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Disbelief, shock, dawning horror, and finally a kind of hysterical acceptance. 1645. I'm in Africa. In 1645, 300 years before I was born. Yes. How is that possible? I'll explain everything, Nachi promised. But right now, sister! Chima's shout cut across the gathering crowd. He pushed through people with warrior's efficiency, his face a mask of relief and fury. You brought him. You actually brought the stranger here. Have you lost all sense? Where's Obi? Nachi demanded, standing. Is he? Still alive, barely. Chima grabbed her arm, his grip tight. The healers have been keeping him stable, but he's fading. If this man has knowledge that can save him, it needs to happen now. Obi has minutes, not hours. Kang-chi was staring at Chima now, at the traditional Igbo warrior attire, at the beaded necklaces and wrapped cloths, at the weapons that looked both ceremonial and deadly. His face showed he was putting pieces together. You're from here, he said slowly, looking between Chima and Nachi. You're both from this place, this time, but I saw you in Siberia, In 1945, how? Time travel, Nachi said simply. My people discovered how to move between timelines centuries ago. I've been using it she hesitated, to watch you, for years. I'm sorry, I know you've been watching me? Kang Chi's expression was impossible to read. For how long? Since you were 10 years old. He stopped, started again. That's incredibly creepy. I know, but you also saved my life, twice now. Yes, and you need my help to save someone you care about. Nachi looked at this man she'd loved from shadows and distances, this man who was processing impossible information with remarkable composure, and made a choice, to be honest. My betrothed. He was shot protecting me from Soviet soldiers. The healers here don't understand modern weapons, but you were in the war. You've seen battlefield medicine. I know you have the knowledge to save him. Understanding dawned on Kang Chi's face, and with it, a kind of sad resignation. You have a fiancé. I have a commitment made when I was 16 to a good man I respect, but don't love. Nachi extended her hand. But right now, I have a dying man who needs help. Will you come? Kang Chi took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. Show me. The healing house fell into hushed silence when they entered. Obi lay exactly as Nachi had left him, but worse. His breathing more labored, his face grayer, the smell of infection beginning to tinge the air despite the healer's best efforts. Kang Chi knelt beside him immediately, his hands moving to unwrap bandages with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times in too many battlefield hospitals. His face went grim as he examined the wound. The bullet's still in there, he said, probing gently around the entry point, lodged near the lung by the angle. I'm not a trained surgeon, but he looked at the primitive tools available, at the herbs the healers had prepared, at Nachi's desperate face. I've seen this done in field hospital. Watched doctors work. I know the principles, but I can't promise anything. Please, Nachi whispered, her voice breaking. You'll please just try. Kang Chi looked at the medical supplies she'd stolen, recognizing some, puzzling over others. These are from a more advanced timeline than mine. Where did you get antibiotics this pure? 1950, Nachi admitted. You can travel to the future too? We can travel anywhere in time, forward or backward. Kang Chi shook his head. Okay. We'll deal with the existential crisis later. Right now, let's save this man's life. For the next 90 minutes, Kang Chi worked with the steady hands of someone who'd learned medicine in the worst classroom imaginable, war. He used the stolen surgical tools to carefully extract the bullet, millimeter by agonizing millimeter, while Adais assisted with her 60 years of healing knowledge, while Nachi held Obi's hand and whispered prayers in Igbo, chewing while the entire healing house held its breath. When the bullet finally came free, a small, deadly piece of metal that had nearly ended a life, Kang Chi cleaned the wound with antiseptic, packed it with a careful combination of antibiotics and the healer's poultices. Whatever's in these is actually promoting clotting better than anything I've seen. Don't change the recipe. And stitched it closed with precise sutures. He'll survive, Kang Chi said finally, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. The infection risk is still high, but the antibiotics should help. And honestly, these herbal treatments you're using, they're remarkable. I don't know what's in them, but they work. Adais nodded with professional respect, studying this strange man who'd brought knowledge from another time. You have skill. You honored the wound. This is good medicine. Obi's eyes fluttered open, still hazed with pain, but conscious for the first time since the shooting. His gaze focused on Kang Chi's face above him, taking in the torn American uniform, the exhausted expression, the evidence that this stranger had just saved his life. You, Obi rasped, his voice weak. You're the stranger, the one she loves. I'm the one she saved, Kang Chi corrected quietly. And you're the one she came back for, the one she risked everything to save. You must be very important to her. I'm her betrothed. Obi's hand, weak but determined, found Nachi's where she knelt beside him. I was raised for her, promised to her. I love her more than my own life. His eyes found Nachi's face. And she loves you. I can see it. I hate it, but I see it. Tears were streaming down Nachi's face. Obi, I'm so sorry. I never meant. I know. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture of affection and farewell. Fix this, Nachi. Somehow. Figure out what you want, but fix it. Then he slipped back into healing sleep, leaving Nachi caught between two men and two timelines, and too many broken promises to count. The next 8 months passed like a fever dream. Kang Chi couldn't return to his timeline. Not yet. The elders explained with grave faces that the temporal paradox created by his disappearance needed time to stabilize, that jumping him back too soon could create worse ripples. But Nachi suspected the truth was more political. The council was debating what to do with a man from the future who'd seen too much and knew too much. So Kang Chi stayed and learned, and slowly, inevitably, fell in love with a world he'd been taught could never have existed. "You built this," he said on his second week, standing in the central square at dawn, watching Umachime wake up around him. "In the 17th century, without any European contact or influence, you created this level of organization, this architecture, this sophistication?" "Yes." Nachi stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "We did. Does that surprise you?" Kang Chi stopped, choosing his words carefully. "In my time, in the schools I attended, they taught us that before colonization, that civilization here was primitive?" Nachi's voice had an edge sharp enough to cut. "Savage? Waiting for Europeans to bring the light of civilization? I've read your textbooks, Kang Chi. I've seen what your world teaches about my people. Every word is a lie. I'm starting to see that." He gestured at the geometric patterns in the buildings, the carefully planned irrigation system carrying water through the town, the evidence of metallurgy and weaving and pottery that rivaled anything from his time. "This is incredible. Why don't the elders use their knowledge to prevent what's coming? You know colonization happens. You know about the slave trade, the exploitation, the systematic destruction of African societies. Why not use time travel to stop it?" Nachi's hands clenched into fists. "Because we tried. Centuries ago, the first time travelers tried to change everything they saw that hurt them. They stopped a war, prevented a drought, and killed a tyrant before he could rise to power. And the war they stopped was replaced by 3 worse wars within a generation. The drought they prevented became flooding that destroyed entire regions. The tyrant's death created a power vacuum that led to worse oppression." Nachi's voice was bitter. "Every change created ripples, and the ripples created waves. And the waves drowned innocent people who never asked to be part of someone else's crusade to fix history. So you just watch, accept? We choose wisdom over hubris. We acknowledge that our understanding is limited, that we can't see all the consequences of our actions, that changing time might feel heroic, but creates more suffering than it prevents." "That must be torture," Kang Chi said softly, "knowing what's coming and being powerless to stop it." "It is." Nachi's voice broke slightly. "Which is why I kept jumping, kept looking for some way, some answer that would let me save my people without destroying them in the process, and instead, I found you." The space between them felt charged with everything they weren't saying. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Kang Chi learned Igbo, stumbling over tones and pronunciation, while children giggled at his mistakes and patiently corrected him. He worked alongside the blacksmiths, learning to forge tools and decorative pieces, his battlefield-hardened hands finding purpose in creation instead of destruction. He attended council meetings where elders debated with a democratic process that would have shocked the civilized governments of his time. So he taught the children English, drawing letters in the dust, explaining concepts from his world. He shared stories of his time, carefully edited to avoid revealing too much about weapons or warfare, that fascinated and horrified his listeners in equal measure. And he fell in love with the culture, with the wisdom, with the way people here lived in harmony with sophisticated organization, with the woman who'd saved him and showed him a truth his world had tried to bury. Obi recovered slowly, the gunshot wound leaving a scar he wore like a badge of complicated honor. He watched Nachi and Kang Chi with eyes that saw too much, understood too well, hurt in ways that medicine couldn't heal. "You should claim her," Chima told Obi one evening, frustration making his voice harsh. "You're her betrothed. The elders would support you, but make her honor the commitment our father made." "I don't want a wife who honors commitment out of duty," Obi said quietly, his hand unconsciously touching the scar on his chest. "I want a wife who wants to be my wife, and she doesn't. She never has. I was just too proud to admit it." "Then what will you do?" Obi looked toward the river where Nachi and Kang Chi sat talking in the golden evening light, their heads close together, the air between them crackling with attraction neither had yet acknowledged out loud. "What honor demands," Obi said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "I'll release her, and I'll hate myself for loving her enough to do it." 6 months into Kang Chi's stay, on an evening when the air smelled of approaching rain and infinite possibilities. Nachi took him to the sacred time travel chamber. The chamber was carved into living rock beneath the oldest part of Umuchime, its walls covered in symbols that predated any written language Kangchi knew. The air felt different here, thicker, charged, humming with potential energy. "I shouldn't show you this," Nachi said, running her fingers over markings that glowed faintly at her touch. "It's forbidden to share with outsiders, but you deserve to understand. How does it work?" Kangchi studied the symbols, recognizing none of them, understanding somehow that they represented knowledge his world had lost or never discovered. "It's not technology," Nachi explained, her voice taking on the rhythm of teaching. "It's communion with time itself. We don't control it. We ask permission. We flow with it like swimmers in a river, moving between currents." The elders who first discovered this spent generations in meditation and observation, learning that time isn't linear. It's more like, she struggled for words, like a river with many currents moving at different speeds. We learn to swim between them. "I know I have asked this before, but why doesn't your world use this to prevent every war, every disaster, every suffering? Why not unite the other neighboring Igbo tribes? Why not build a strong empire to prevent is to come? Why not prepare to fight off the slave traders in Africa that will work with these foreigners?" "We tried." Obanaya's voice came from the entrance, making them both jump. Nachi spun, caught in the forbidden act of sharing sacred knowledge. Her father looked at her with resignation rather than anger. "We tried to stop a lot of bad things. Centuries ago, our ancestors tried exactly that. They stopped wars, prevented droughts, changed what they thought needed changing. And it made things worse," Kangchi said, understanding. The ripples became waves," Obanaya confirmed, moving into the chamber with the authority of someone who belonged here. "And the waves crashed over innocent people who never asked to be part of someone's heroic crusade. So we made a choice as a people. Observe, but never interfere. Record, but never change. Accept what will be. Even colonization," Kangchi said. "Even slavery. Even knowing your people will be scattered and exploited. Even that," Obanaya looked at his daughter. "Because we've learned that our wisdom has limits, that we cannot see all consequences, that humility before time is safer than hubris." He paused. "Still, most of us learned that lesson anyway." After Obanaya left, Nachi and Kangchi sat in silence, the weight of impossible knowledge pressing down on them both. "I don't belong here," Kangchi said finally. "I know, but I've never felt more at home. I know that too." "Nachi," he took her hand, and the touch sent electricity up both their arms. "In my world, I'm nobody. Just another Korean-American kid whose parents worked themselves to death so I could have opportunities. I enlisted because it was expected. Would probably have died in some forgotten battle and been forgotten myself. But here, when you look at me, I feel like I matter. You matter to me more than any timeline," Nachi said fiercely. "More than any law or duty or future. You're worth every punishment I'll face." They kissed then, finally, desperately, 6 months of longing compressed into a single, perfect moment. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers gripped his shoulders, and for one impossible breath, the laws and timelines and consequences ceased to exist. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kangchi rested his forehead against hers. "What are we going to do?" he whispered. "I don't know," Nachi admitted, "but I know I can't let you go." That was the moment Obanaya summoned them to the Council of Elders. The council chamber was packed with the weight of judgment. 12 elders sat in a semicircle, 6 men and 6 women representing the wisdom of Umuchime, their combined knowledge spanning centuries. Obanaya sat at the center, his face carved from stone. Behind them, tapestries showed the history of their people, the founding of Umuchime, the discovery of time travel, the generations of discipline and wisdom. Nachi stood before them with Kangchi at her side, facing their future. Kangchi of the 1945 timeline, Obanaya began formally, his voice carrying the authority of law and tradition. "You have lived among us for 8 months. You have learned our language, our customs, our most sacred secrets. The council must now decide your fate. Do you return to your timeline with your memory intact, risking exposure of our existence? Or do we perform the forgetting ritual and send you back to your war as if none of this ever happened?" Kangchi's hand found Nachi's, their fingers interlacing. "I would ask to stay, if that's permitted." Murmurs rippled through the assembled observers. "You cannot stay," said Adoz, her ancient voice heavy with regret. Your absence from your timeline has already created ripples we can measure. Small now, but growing. We've observed changes in your world, battles that went differently, decisions made by men who should have encountered you but didn't. The longer you stay, the worse the paradox becomes. You must return." "Then let me return with my memories," Kong Chi pleaded. "I swear on everything I hold sacred. I'll never speak of Umuchaim. I'll take your secret to my grave." "Can you truly promise that?" another elder asked, her eyes kind but skeptical. "When government agents question you about where you've been for 15 years? When your family asks how you survived? When the woman you'll eventually marry wonders why you speak words in Igbo during your sleep? 15 years? It's only been 8 months, Kong Chi said. 15 years have passed in your timeline. The elder responded with something in his eyes that Kang Chi did not quite understand. "God, I won't marry," Kang Chi said, and Nachi's heart clenched. "I can't. Not when I've fallen in love with someone I can never have." "That's precisely the problem," Obadiah said, his voice gentle but immovable. "You'll live half a life, haunted by memories of a world you can never return to, in love with a woman forever out of reach. Is that the life you choose? It's the only life that honors what I feel." "And what of Nachi?" Adaisi looked at her with grandmother's eyes. "You're betrothed to Obi, a commitment made in childhood but binding nonetheless. Will you abandon that promise for a love that cannot survive the boundaries of time?" Before Nachi could answer, Obi stood from where he'd been sitting among the observers. The healing house had released him 2 months ago. The gunshot wound now a pale scar on his dark skin, a reminder of the day everything changed. He moved through the crowd with warrior's grace, every eye following him as he approached the council. "I release her," Obi said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed chamber. "From our betrothal, from all obligations and promises. She never wanted to marry me. I was just too proud to see it until a bullet taught me clarity." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Nachi stared at him, shocked into silence. "Obi," she started. "I love you," Obi continued, looking directly at her, his eyes holding everything he'd never fully said. "I always will, but I can't marry a woman whose heart belongs to someone else. Even if that someone exists 300 years in the future, it would dishonor us both." He turned to face the elders. "Let her choose. For once in her life, let Nachi choose her own path, instead of following the one we laid out for her before she could walk." The council erupted into heated debate, elders arguing over precedent and law, tradition and compassion, duty and love. The noise rose until Obadiah raised one hand, and silence fell like a curtain. "Kang Chi must return," Obadiah announced, his voice final. "The paradox demands it. The longer he remains, the more damage he causes to his own timeline. But Nachi," he looked at his daughter with eyes that held a lifetime of wisdom and deep, bone-weary sadness. "The choice is yours, daughter. Stay here, marry another eventually, live the life you were born to live. Or go with him," Nachi finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "To a timeline that's not mine, to a world that will never fully accept us, to a future I've seen and know is full of pain." "Yes," Kang Chi squeezed her hand. "Nachi, don't give up your world for me. You belong here, with your people, your family, everything you've ever known. I belong with you." Nachi turned to face him fully, her eyes fierce. "I've spent years jumping through time trying to find a future worth living, and I found you instead. Maybe that was the point all along. Think about what you're giving up." "The council will adjourn for 3 days," Obadiah interrupted, his voice heavy. "Nachi, think very carefully. This choice cannot be unmade. If you go with him to his timeline, you can never return to ours. Our laws forbid it absolutely. You'll be severed from Umuchaim, from your family, from everything you've known. You'll exist in a time not your own, aging at a different rate, living as a perpetual stranger." He paused. "Is he worth all of that?" Nachi looked at Kang Chi, honorable and confused and trying to convince her not to sacrifice everything for him, even though it was killing him. Then at Obi, dignified in his heartbreak. Then at her father, whose eyes held wisdom and sorrow in equal measure. "Yes," she said, "he's worth that." But 3 days later, when the moment came to make the final choice, Nachi stood frozen. She stood in the chamber with the time travel ritual prepared, with Kang Chi waiting beside the glowing symbols, with her entire family gathered to say what they thought would be goodbye forever. And the words wouldn't come, because Obadiah had pulled her aside that morning and said something that changed everything. "Daughter," her father had said, his hands on her shoulders, "I've spent the last 3 days observing the timeline branches, watching potential futures, and I've seen something you need to know." "What, Baba?" "If Kang Chi returns alone, if the paradox is resolved correctly, there's a possibility." He'd hesitated. "A small one, perhaps 1 in 10, but real. His disappearance, if timed right, if resolved correctly, could contribute to the outcome of the war he left. To victory, to saved lives, thousands of them." Nachi had stared at him. "How?" "I don't fully understand it. The ripples are complex, but his absence created a gap that forced others to step up, to make different choices. His return, if done correctly, creates a cascade of small events that matter. But if you go with him, if you disrupt the timeline further, those lives may be lost instead. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You're saying I have to choose between him and thousands of strangers. I'm saying every choice has weight, and wisdom is accepting the full burden of what we choose." So Nachi stood silent and paralyzed, while Kang Chi watched understanding dawn across his face. "You're not coming," he said quietly. Her voice broke. "Kang Chi, I want to, I need to, but my father says if I go with you, people die. Thousands of them. I can't." "You're trying to save the world," Kang Chi said, his eyes glistening. "Even when it costs you everything. That's why I love you. That's why this hurts so goddamn much. I'm sorry." Tears streamed down Nachi's face. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." He cupped her face in his hands, memorizing every detail. "Be brave. Be wise. Be everything you already are." The elders began the ritual. Kang Chi stepped into the circle carved into the floor, his eyes never leaving Nachi's face even as the symbols began to glow. She wanted to run to him, to grab him, to refuse to let go. But she stayed frozen, and the ritual completed, and he vanished in a pulse of light and power. Gone. Back to 1960 in his timeline. 15 years after he'd left, because time didn't flow the same between worlds without her. Nachi collapsed, and Obi, faithful, heartbroken Obi, caught her before she hit the ground. But they'd miscalculated one critical thing. They'd thought sending Kang Chi back would be the end of it. She thought that Nachi would grieve and heal and eventually build a new life. That wisdom would win over love. They didn't account for the fact that Nachi had never been very good at following rules. Exactly 1 week later, she performed her own time travel ritual and followed him. "Nachi, no!" Obadiah's shout came too late. The world dissolved around her, and Nachi emerged in 1960 America with careful preparation. She'd studied this era extensively, had stolen appropriate clothing, a modest dress, simple heels, a headscarf to partially cover her distinctive hairstyle, had learned to style herself to blend in as much as an ancient African woman possibly could in segregated 1960s America. She found him in California within a week, had been extensively interrogated about his 15-year disappearance, had tried to build something resembling a normal life, but he looked haunted, still appearing 23 years old despite 15 years passing in his timeline, which had caused its own cascade of problems and questions and investigations. Nachi watched from across the street as Kang Chi left his modest apartment, and their eyes met. The recognition was instant, electric, impossible. He crossed the street without looking, car horns blaring around him, and pulled her into an embrace so tight it hurt. "You came." He breathed into her hair, his whole body shaking. "You actually came. I thought I'd lost you forever. I tried to stay away," Nachi admitted, holding him just as tightly. "Tried to be wise. Tried to accept what couldn't be changed." "Screw acceptance," Kang Chi said fiercely. "I've spent all this time trying to forget you. It's the one thing I can't do." They had 3 weeks together. 3 weeks of Nachi learning to navigate 1960s America, of late-night conversations about everything they'd never said, of stolen moments that felt like borrowed time. But U.S. intelligence had never stopped watching the man who didn't age, and when a black woman in unusual dress started appearing near Kang Chi's apartment, they noticed immediately. They took Nachi on a Tuesday, not violently, just efficiently. Black sedans, suited men. Kang Chi screaming her name as they loaded her into a van while he was restrained by other agents. The facility was underground, sterile, terrifying in its clinical efficiency. Scientists took samples, blood, tissue, hair. ran tests that made no sense with their equipment, but they ran them anyway. Shatin kept her in a white room with cameras and guards and endless questions. Who are you? Where are you from? How did you meet Kang Chi? What's your connection to the 1945 incidents in Siberia? After Nachi had saved Kang Chi from the Soviet soldiers in 1945, rumors of a black angel and a bear had spread like wildfire in the military camps. After the war, everybody in the country knew about that accident. The US intelligence had concluded that it was probably UFOs, and the Soviet intelligence kept investigating. Nachi stayed silent, grew weaker with each passing day, began to fade in ways that alarmed even her captors. She's deteriorating, a scientist reported to his superiors. Psychologically and physically, it's almost as if being here is killing her. It was. Being severed from her timeline, her land, her people, time itself was slowly rejecting her presence where she didn't belong. In ancient Umuchaime, Obi felt it through the blood bond that had never fully broken. She's dying, he told Chima, his hand pressed to his chest where the scar from the gunshot wound seemed to burn. In his timeline, she's fading. I can feel it. Then let her die, Chima exploded, years of frustration boiling over. Let her face the consequences of her reckless choices. She abandoned us, abandoned her people, abandoned everything. She's one of us. She's mine, Obi said, his voice steel wrapped in velvet. And I'm not letting her die alone in a foreign time because we were too proud to save her. If we go to that timeline, we expose ourselves further. I don't care! Obi's shout echoed through the compound. She saved my life. She's worth saving. So end of discussion. Obadiah found them preparing weapons for the rescue. Determination carved into every line of their bodies. If you do this, their father warned, you risk everything. The exposure will be undeniable. The consequences are worth her life, Chima finished. He looked at the man who'd raised him, who'd taught him wisdom and restraint and duty. Baba, you taught us to accept what cannot be changed. But sometimes wisdom is also knowing what's worth fighting for. Obadiah studied his daughter's betrothed and his son. Both warriors, both fools, both willing to risk everything for a woman who'd broken their hearts. Go, he said quietly. Bring her home, before she destroys herself completely. The rescue was beautiful chaos. Obi and Chima materialized in 1960 America, wearing full traditional Igbo warrior attire, and the city immediately lost its collective mind. Where did they? Call the police. The culture shock hit them like a physical force. Brother, the metal beasts. Chima stared at passing cars. They move on their own, without animals. Focus! Obi used his blood bond to track Nachi, following the thread of pain and fading life force through the city. They saw their first traffic light and froze. The lights command the metal beasts, Chima said, fascinated. A man stepped out of a building through automatic sliding doors. Both warriors drew weapons. Sorcery! They shouted. The man screamed and ran. Police approached. Hands up! Or drop your weapons! Obi and Chima moved with warrior speed, disarming the officers without hurting them, taking their weapons, staring at the guns like they were cursed artifacts. These are the distance death weapons, Obi said grimly. Nachi was right. They dropped the guns and ran. Their sprint through the city created pandemonium. Two African warriors in traditional dress, jumping over cars. Chima screaming, "The beasts don't bite," using incredible athleticism to vault obstacles, causing accidents and chaos everywhere they went. They saw an escalator, tried to run up the downside, got stuck, had to be pulled off by confused shoppers. "This magic is terrible," Chima shouted. Despite the comedy, they tracked Nachi relentlessly, through 3 levels of increasingly frantic security. Like they fought their way into the government facility holding her, disarming guards with traditional combat techniques that modern soldiers had no defense against. The facility erupted into chaos, alarms wailing, guards scattered, scientists fleeing. Obi and Chima reached the holding area where Nachi lay unconscious, too pale, too still, hooked to machines they didn't understand. "What have they done to you?" Obi's voice cracked as he gently removed the IVs and wires, lifting her with infinite care. She weighed almost nothing. "Brother, we need to go now." Chima was at the door, hearing reinforcements approaching. They ran, through corridors, past shocked personnel, toward an exit that seemed infinitely far. Guards fired. Obi was hit in the shoulder. Not fatal, but painful. He didn't slow, didn't let go of Nachi. In a corridor, Du Kangchi saw them. Time crystallized, became the moment that would haunt 3 people forever. Obi carrying unconscious Nachi, blood from his shoulder wound dripping onto her dress. Chima providing cover, all about to vanish. Nachi's eyes fluttered open for one impossible second. Saw Kangchi, everything she felt, everything she couldn't say, all in one look. Her lips moved, forming words in Korean. Saranghae, I love you. Nachi! Kangchi lunged forward. Guards held him back. Obi and Chima reached their anchor point. The ritual flared. Light consumed them. They vanished. Kangchi collapsed, guards releasing him as he fell to his knees, staring at empty space where his heart had just disappeared. Gone. Back to her time. Forever out of reach. Kangchi was taken to court by the intelligence because they suspected he was working for the enemy or had access to enemy aliens. The trial was brief. The evidence was circumstantial. Soviet reports from 1945. Witness testimonies of impossible events. Nachi's biological samples, which she'd taken with her, leaving nothing behind. I was captured in 1945, Kangchi testified, his voice flat. I don't remember by whom. The trauma. Everything's fragmented. But witnesses, what do witnesses see in wartime? Fear makes people unreliable. Lack of hard evidence. Decorated veteran. Spotless record before disappearance. The case was eventually dismissed. But Kangchi kept one thing. The note Nachi had slipped him before her capture. Written in Igbo. Deny me if anything goes wrong. Save yourself. I will love you across time. Late at night, he'd read it. Touch it like sacred text. Wonder if she was looking at the same stars, 300 years away. In Umuchime, Nachi healed. Physically, quickly, emotionally. That took longer. You learned the lesson, Obinaya said one evening. That time is not ours to command. I hate this lesson, Nachi whispered. Most wisdom feels like loss. And somewhere in Siberia, an old bear kept faith. Every winter, the bear returned to the buried shelter, placed her paw on the frozen door, waited for her friend who never came. The bear couldn't know that her black angel was trapped in another time. Couldn't know the love story she'd witnessed had ended in separation. Couldn't know anything except that the woman who'd shown her kindness was gone. But she waited, season after season, year after year, until one final winter. The old bear, graying and slow, made one last visit, sniffed the door, let out a mournful sound that echoed across the frozen wasteland. Her adult cub nuzzled her gently. The old bear looked at the sky, then, with great dignity, turned away, walked into the blizzard with her cub, never returned. The shelter remained, slowly consumed by ice, holding secrets no one would know. No one knew that a love across centuries had changed history, that a soldier's paradoxical disappearance had rippled through time, affecting outcomes in ways no one could trace. No one knew that an African warrior had saved lives and broken laws and chosen wisdom when it cost everything. No one knew that a bear had carried hope through frozen wasteland and waited with loyalty beyond understanding. The world moved on. America grew. Technology advanced. Time flowed forward. But 3 hearts remained frozen, stopped in a moment that could never be reclaimed. In Umuchime, a woman longed for the love that was separated by time. In 1960s America, a man kept a note in an unknown language written by a woman no one believed existed. In Siberia, snow covered all evidence, burying memory itself. 3 hearts, frozen. 3 lives, forever altered. 3 timelines, impossibly connected. The lesson was this: love fiercely, choose wisely, accept what cannot be changed. Some loves we carry forever, even when we cannot have them. Some friends wait forever, loyal beyond reason. Some stories pause, suspended in time, waiting for someone to remember. This is what really happened. This is the truth behind the Black Angel legend. The bear, the woman, the soldier, the love that broke time itself. My name is Onyx, and I'm writing this story 66 years later in Umuchime. Before you go, this wasn't just about impossible love or time travel or talking bears. It was about the weight of wisdom, the cost of choice, the truth that being smart doesn't mean being happy. Nachi understood that knowledge without wisdom is destruction. The bear understood that loyalty needs no language. Kangchi learned that some sacrifices honor love more than possession. Real strength isn't changing the world. It's accepting what you cannot change and finding meaning in what remains. Thank you for staying until the end. You're incredible. The kindnesses you show ripple through time in ways you'll never understand. Some loves we keep forever. Some friends wait forever. Some stories are never truly over. Don't go anywhere. And I will see you in the next story. God bless you.